Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this kind invitation, and thank you, Thomas, for the introduction. It's a huge pleasure to be here, and it's very nice to see so many previous and present colleagues, and I'm also, in particular, very pleased to see so many colleagues of the SMART doctoral program. There are about 30 people of this program actually here at this conference. Before I start, I also would like to thank a lot of people, and I mention a couple of them, because the data, the ideas that I'm showing today, these are shared ideas, these are shared data. And it's a privilege to work with very dedicated and very nice people together. I changed a little bit the title. I'm asking a more provocative one, The End of Nature, of course with a question mark behind. And I would start, and probably many of you have read this book, Life After Warming. It's showing what we may expect if there is an increase of 2, 4, or 8 degrees in the next decades or centuries. And we already have passed in many areas the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees in the Arctic, in the mountains, in the Alps, and so on. The Danube, for example, the temperature increased by 1.5 degrees over the last decades, 0.5 degree per decade. The temperature that we had 30 years ago at the border between Hungary and Serbia, Croatia, moved 350 kilometers west, and this is the temperature we have today at the border between Austria and Slovakia. And there are huge influences or consequences, not just for the environment, but also for human health. For example, one effect of human health on human health is the effect of extreme events on mental health. For example, Hurricane Katrina, 62% of the evacuees had a trauma afterwards, acute stress disorder. This is what we see in many of these extreme events afterwards, in particular also in children. It's bigger than the effects that soldiers experience when they are going to walk countries. So there's a huge effect on mental health. And when we are talking about environmental change or climate warming, about climate depression or environmental grief. I take a quote here from John Holdren. He was the science advisor of President Obama, that we only have 3 options, and it's quite simple: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. I think it's very difficult to imagine what we will face in the next decades or even centuries. There are 2 reasons. The first one is that there is a lack of individual or personal responsibility. There was a survey in Europe recently where they asked 19,000 people about climate change. Generally, it was an agreement there is global warming, but only 30% felt a personal responsibility for this. So this is one aspect, and the second is a lack of imagination. What does it mean, 2 degrees increase in average? We can look the opposite. What does it mean, less or a lowering of 2 degrees? The worst year in history was the year 536 AD. There were a couple of Icelandic volcanoes that erupted, and it led to a decrease in summer temperatures between 1.5 to 2.5 degrees. It was the worst year in living history. The economy took 100 years before it recovered, and the bubonic plague, as a consequence of this, led to the deaths of almost 50% of the population of the Eastern Roman Empire. And again, I take here a quote from Stephen Hawking in his last book about where we'll be in 100 or in 500 years. And he says, "I'm convinced that humans need to leave Earth. If we stay, we risk being annihilated." So this is a future if we take not 20 years, but maybe 200 years. But of course, we are thinking about solutions, and there's a huge pressure at the moment coming up to think about geoengineering, about climate engineering, engineering solutions. large-scale intervention in the Earth's climate system to reduce global warming. And there are two directions. The first one is to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and the second one is cutting the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth, which is solar radiation management. We don't know what the consequences is. There is one danger. It would cost only, the calculate is 2 billion a year to spread sulfur into the atmosphere. So there's a kind of techno-scientific promises that we are facing here. If you shed the sun, it doesn't decrease the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So for example, ocean acidification will go on. And we don't know again what an increase in carbon dioxide has again for cognitive issues of humans as well. So I cite here, because this only would be one of, we have two experiments. The first one is we are globally heating the Earth. The second, we are trying to solve this with another kind of global experiment as well. I cite here Jack Stilgoe. The world today is a vast, unsupervised laboratory in which a multitude of experiments are simultaneously underway. Many of these experiments are not recognized as such. One of these experiments is, for example, the illumination of the night, the change of the nightscapes. This is in the Alps, 300 kilometers west from here. It looks like this Alpine Inn-Valley. It's like a big urbanized area. And again, this is a self-experiment with unpredictable outcome. We don't know really what are the long-term consequences for human health, the social ecological consequences, and so on. And if we do these experiments, we have to ask, what is the purpose? Who will be hurt? Who benefits? And how can we know? What surprises are permitted? And how uncertainties are imagined? So these experiments are going on, these large-scale transformations. Let's go now to the water sector. If we are looking on the global distribution of freshwater resources, first we have enough freshwater globally, but it's uneven distributed. It's uneven distributed in space, you can see here, and it's uneven distributed in time. And there is an increase in the degree of uneven distribution due to global warming and due to direct human impacts. One aspect is that already at the moment, 50% of the rivers fall dry at the surface. And we may face a major increase, both in the spatial extent and in the duration of dry rivers in the near future. But we don't know exactly what the extent is and what exactly the increase will be, because we as scientists, we also ignored temporary rivers because no one felt responsible for this. It wasn't in the domain of terrestrial or aquatic ecologists, so we ignored 50% of our river system somehow as well. The second aspect is that there is a very close relationship between economic development, for example in Africa, and rainfall variation. When you have a wetter year, you have an increase in GDP. If you have a dry year, you have a decrease. But it's not including at the moment extreme events. When we have major flood or major drought events, it may in any case, it will reduce the economy or harm the economy of these countries. Like in Africa, which is an agricultural dominated economy, and it's rain-fed agriculture, and therefore we see this very close relationship. So we have this, we have enough freshwater, uneven distributed, and there will be an increase in the uneven distribution. How to solve this? And again, we are looking primarily for engineering solutions. We are transferring water long distances, we build large dams, we build desalination plants. Here you see the desalination plant of Sydney, 25 hectare, you can desalinate up to 250,000 cubic meter per day. So this is the kind of solutions we are seeking. We are seeking for engineering solutions. Again, you know this graph, that we are in a phase of big acceleration. We see this exponential increase, whatever we are looking for, human population, large dams, water use, during the period of the Anthropocene. And let's take The hydropower dams as a well-documented example. These are the spatial distribution of the present large dams. There's now a better database available. You will hear more on Thursday than about Dam Watch. And this is the kind of dams that are under construction or in the planning phase. 3,800 dams that are planned or already under construction. They will double the electricity production in the next decades. There are three reasons for this boom in hydropower. The first one is to meet the increasing energy demands. The second is because it's considered wrongly as a climate-neutral energy source. And the third one is to provide energy for the 1 billion plus people who do not have at the moment access to electricity. But you also see that the major areas where we'll see this boom are in South America, parts of Africa, in the Balkan area, in the Himalayas and Southeast Asia. Particularly, it is a global business. It's a big global business. We saw a six-fold increase in hydropower dam construction over the last decade. 2 trillion would be the cost, the calculated cost at the moment just for the construction. And we know there's a strong underestimation. Normally, there's a doubling of the cost that we will face there. It's huge international companies that are involved in the construction. There's no correlation between the future hydropower dam construction and the economic condition of a country because the electricity will be primarily for export and for industry. And there's one kind of nexus. We are not talking about this. And this is the nexus between water, energy, and the mining industry. So this is something we really have to consider on this kind of linkages. Who will benefit from this hydropower dam construction? It's not a question, hydropower, yes or no. But we as scientists, we have to provide answers. Where to build them, and how to operate these dams. Coming back to this picture on the light pollution. Because the light pollution is increasing at a global scale as well, rapidly, in average 6% per year, because we have so-called rebound effects. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to illuminate 1 square meter, and therefore we are illuminating just more. 19% of the electricity is just used for illuminating the night. This is exactly the share of the hydropower to the total electricity production. It means all the hydropower dams that we have are just used to illuminate the night. And if we look on the future progress, then we only see a very small increase in the share of hydropower dams because there's a strong increase in energy demand as well. So the present and the future illumination of light needs all, or the illumination of light needs all the present and probably also the future dams just to do this. And this is just one. I mean, we all know that the effects will be in free-flowing rivers. So we illuminate the night. There's not really an increase, but we harm the environment. At present, only 1/3 of the large rivers are still free-flowing. They are located in the Arctic Zone. They are located in the Amazon and in part in Central Africa. There are 2 large rivers in Southeast Asia remaining, the Salween and the Irrawaddy. And if we build these dams, and these are the yellows, we will lose a lot of the remaining free-flowing rivers in the future. And it's already starting, it's already going on. And it's primarily areas where we have the highest species diversity. Freshwater megafauna can be used as a surrogate for freshwater biodiversity. We see the hotspots of freshwater biodiversity in the areas where we will face the future dams, so there's a strong overlap. And so it will have major consequences on our natural heritage globally. And this also, freshwater megafauna are already under huge pressure. There was this very nice paper by Feng He just recently published, which got a lot of international attention because we see a globally 88% of decrease of freshwater populations from 1970 to 2015. In some places, like in Southeast Asia, the decrease is 99%. And this is before the construction of the future hydropower dams. So when we build now these future hydropower dams, you may expect that many of these species will become completely extinct. So I'm coming back to this big acceleration and the Anthropocene. Personally, I feel and I believe that we are just at the beginning of the big acceleration. We are not able to imagine how we will change or how the Earth will be changed in the next 50, 100 and longer years. Two examples, or what we may call terraforming. Terraforming means normally that you have uninhabited planets that you make habitable. But we exactly do in the reverse. We do habitated planets we make uninhabitable. So megaproject will shape our future globe. Two examples here. The first one is here in India, the Linking Rivers project. They already started with this, is to connect all the rivers across the subcontinent to transfer water from the Himalayas to different parts. And the second is from China here. This is where they level up of whole mountain ranges. These are 700 mountains, 225 square kilometers that are just made flat to create space for cities. This is what is going on. And the Aral Lake, again, an example that everyone knows. This was the size of Switzerland. And it's gone. I was a couple of years in Uzbekistan, and they told me no one will engage anymore in saving the Aral Lake there. But there had been plans, and it's not so long ago, the CPRAL project to transfer water from Central Asia to this, from Western Siberia to Central Asia. 2,000 kilometers, 2,000 cubic meters per second. This is the Danube here in Vienna. This project had been stopped in 1986 during the Gorbachev period. But in the recent years, they start to unearth again all the documents in the academies of sciences because the political situation is changing both in Central Asia as well as in Russia. And so this is what Peter Glick calls zombie projects, undeath projects. They are somewhere already developed, and they are waiting for windows of opportunity to be realized. Political windows, there could be a 10-year drought event somewhere, and then you have a political constellation where they start to do this. Second example I use here, again, at the water transfer project, at the mega projects here. These are just the largest projects, 1 billion euro construction cost each. There are 33 at the moment, 3 times the Danube, over 12,000 kilometers. And here they are the proposed, the planned, and the under construction projects. It will increase, there are 76, it will 30 Danubes, 2 times the diameter of Earth, and again, huge construction costs that may involve there. So what we have is what we may call the pandemic array of the transformation in the water cycle. Mega projects are built on self-confidence about technological progress. They are also considered as a way to stimulate economic development and demonstrate power. Generally, there's an underestimation of the risk and an overestimation of the benefits, otherwise they wouldn't be realized, which is called the survival of the unfittest. The mega projects also constrain, of course, opportunities for future generations, because there are huge economic, social, and ecological costs associated with this. We need a reference-based forecasting and an outside view on this. As with the dams, we saw many of the dams are constructed or will be constructed in areas where we don't have the same standards as we have, for example, in Japan or in Europe. And what are solutions? Are ecological engineering solutions? Are there solutions to better link technical systems and natural systems in the future? Is a nature-based approach the solution? We have to provide answers as scientists as well, how to really provide options or solutions on how to cope with these challenges. We can add then the global road network. There's a similar expansion by 25 million kilometers expected until 2050. So we can add one of the next layers. And so if we imagine what will be the consequences on the midterm, on the long term of these changes, I think we are not able to imagine these changes. I'm now making a short other pressure that probably are not really talked about, but will also have a huge influence, not just on how we treat our environment, but also in democracies. And this is what we call the privatization of knowledge. When we are looking on the money spent for research and development on the OECD countries, we see a strong increase by industry, and at the same time we see a proportional decrease of spending by the public. Only 1/4 of the money that is allocated for research and development is by the public. The rest is by industry, military, secret services. The biggest investors for research and development is the American military, and the American secret services invest more in research and development than France and Germany together, more than all universities, Max Planck and CNRS institutions. This is knowledge that is generated that is not considered to be publicly available. We are talking about Horizon Europe, about the big project for research and development, 100 billion for 7 years. These are 14 billions per year. This is what a company like Samsung or VW spend each year as well on research and development. So there is a quote which is still valuable today as well by John Naisby. 40 years ago, we are drowning in information, but we are starved for knowledge. So what we have is, we have an increase in data information, we have an increase of potential public knowledge, but we know that there is no increase in the individual and public knowledge. There's even in the individual level, there's evidence that there's a decrease in knowledge in time. And in between, we have what we call knowledge in the dark or dark knowledge, biased information, inaccessible information, incomprehensible information, and loss of knowledge. How does a society cope with information that is available but not accessible? And how does a society cope with information that we would need, but there are no interest for economic, political, or ideological reasons that we get this knowledge? And this is something we really have to be thinking very much about, because this is something, it's a shift that we are observing in the background. So we are living in a kind of information ignorance paradox. We are living both in an age of information and an age of ignorance. This dark knowledge is increasing in time, and they have what we may call the oligopolization of knowledge. Few know much and many know little. I have to admit that we don't have a scale yet here, so an axis on both, because we are not able yet to quantify this. So this is something, this is just, we have to be aware about this as well. Do we know this? And again, I just can recommend a book, and probably many have read this, The Merchants of Doubt. And it's primarily related to climate change, but also to the tobacco industry, how information and knowledge had been distorted and permanently doubt to reduce in somehow trust in evidence-based knowledge. Any success stories? Of course, there are some success stories, and we need to talk about this. I take the Rhine River. A little bit more than 30 years ago, it was one of the most polluted rivers in Europe. It was the sewer of Europe. Then there was this big accident in Basel, and then there was a huge investment of more than 100 billion to clean up the Rhine River. And it was successful. We see this kind of increase in biodiversity there, an increase in the number of species of benthic invertebrates there. But of course, we have to be careful in using this data, because on the one hand, the community that we have today have very in common with the communities that we had 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, the Rhine was already completely channelized as well. This is not a reference point as well. And we are lucky with the Rhine because we have data 100 years ago. For most systems, we don't have this kind of reference that to show what was the changes in the positive and in a negative way. The second aspect, of course, the Water Framework Directive is in general a big success because nature, ecology had been put in front. But again, if we are looking on this, And this is the data for Germany, good ecological status. The goal is to reach a good ecological status for all waters by 2027. We had 7.8%, and it's even decreasing the proportion. This is again a question, what does it mean if we set goals? Where we know at the beginning we are unable to meet these goals. We are unable to meet the Water Framework Directive goals. We are unable to meet the Paris Agreement goals. We are unable to meet the biodiversity targets that we are setting. So a few challenges. It's very that the first is that we need to manage freshwaters as hybrid system. On the one hand, as a resource for humans, and on the other hand, as very valuable ecosystems. We have to link this. Environmental flow requirements is a big topic, but it's not just the quantity, it's also very much about the quality. We have to link the quality and the quantity. And the third one is, we probably have to completely rethink conservation planning in the future. Probably the present way will not be able to help us in conserving or managing our freshwaters in the future. My last point I would like to make here is about biological diversity. Biological diversity is the accumulated knowledge of several billion years of natural evolution. The decrease and decline of biological diversity is one of the biggest challenges among many other big challenges that we have. We have no idea what it means if we have 10, 20, or 50%, if we lose them, what it means for us as humans and for the nature on the short and on the long term. Biological diversities are somehow the libraries of nature. The ecosystems are the libraries, the species are the books, and the gene variations are the book on a specific topic. No one will treat our cultural libraries in a way as we are treating our natural libraries. We will not allow to do this. And the second aspect, I think we should think, what is the linkage between cultural diversity and biological diversity? When is there a coupling and when it's getting decoupled, and what are the underlying mechanisms that are explaining this coupling and decoupling between biological and cultural diversity? I had the opportunity to work for 10 years, or more than 10 years, on one of these libraries of nature. And here I would like to make a point to Jeff Betts, because we met the first time, 96, there on the Tagliamento, and I can completely agree it was an extremely stimulating discussion we had in the field there, and it was going on till midnight and afterwards as well. So we were working there, and many of you know this system. I got asked, what did we learn from 10, 15 years working on the Tagliamento? What are important? And I take one example, and I think one of the key elements in these systems is large wood. This is not from the Tagliamento, this is from the Danube. When the Danube here east of Vienna was created as a national park, it was not allowed anymore to remove the large wood. And not removing the large wood created this very fascinating mosaic of aquatic and terrestrial systems. We have also to think as river ecologists where there is no maintenance work required. And maybe this is the cheapest way in somehow to restoring or maintaining, just stop maintenance along many of our very cultivated and modified river systems. And with this, thank you very much for listening.